as they become CEO and as their tenure continues, they become egotistical, they become very bossy, they become condescending, and Rob is none of those things. So because of that, it's my extreme pleasure to introduce you to Rob from COUPA, and we're going to have a fireside chat and just to hear a few things that are going on in your mind right now. So will you please come up to stage? Always exciting to have you. So I'm so glad you were able to join us.
Of course. Thank you for having me again.
Always. Because what's going to be interesting is we're not going to hear about COUPA, you're going to hear about our community. And that is something that Rob has been very passionate about. He's recently written his second book, which is fantastic. And I should have asked you to bring copies, and we didn't do that. But people at the COUPA booth over there can get you copies, I bet. But we're going to talk about the community and what his vision is. And his vision is we have so much information coming to us today. And you have somehow managed to create a community where we share the information. So can you just share a little bit about your thought and just let everyone know about your view on community?
Of course, of course. Well, thank you. And again, thank you so much for having me. You know, look, a lot of what we need to do, obviously, in our space, as everyone here knows, is we need to get through all the simple automation and streamlining and all the things we used to do in paper and phone calls and start leveraging information technology the best that we possibly can. And what that affords us to do over time, once we automate some of these baseline processes, is leverage the community. There's a community here in the physical world that Dawn's been bringing together for over a decade to talk about best practices, to talk about lessons learned, to talk about ways to get to drive more value in the companies that we all work for. How can information technology play a role in leveraging the community for greater streamlining and insight and intelligence to help us be smarter and smarter in the way that we support our companies? And within our own world, we're beginning to give our customers the opportunity to begin doing that. So sharing real-time benchmarks or KPIs instantaneously inside an experience to help you make the best decisions on which suppliers to work with, how to streamline your business processes, how to stay away from fraud and risk. These are the real opportunities we have as we develop a procurement, what we like to call business spend management community. And I think we're at the very, very front end of this process. And I think procurement in particular has the opportunity, in my view, to be the tail that wags the dog in terms of taking these types of concepts out to organizations, much more so than other functions like sales or human resources or finance or other areas. So I think it's an extremely exciting opportunity, and I'm really proud to be playing a role in that with many of the customers, by the way, that we have here. I see some two-time customers here, some first-time customers, so very, very excited about this area.
So let's talk about AI. All right, to you, and please tell me, is it still a hype? Do you feel it's reality? And can that be a differentiator for our CPOs to actually be able to be seen as more strategic and drive more value? What are your thoughts?
So representing, let's say, Silicon Valley and the information systems providers, I would say to you that 95% of it is hype. 95% of it is hype. There are VCs in the Valley that are investing in companies at very, very significant valuations if they got some sort of AI story related to what they're offering. But the 5% of it that isn't hype can be extremely powerful. Just think about, the most simple use cases of any kind of data entry, right? You think about an invoice, right? An invoice coming in and someone's actually looking at it and physically entering it into some sort of back-end system, and they're doing that process over and over and over. There are ways to use artificial intelligence and machine learning to streamline that process and have the system actually learn from the way that data entry clerk is looking at the PDF or the paper-based invoice and entering it into the system. And as these systems begin to learn, they get better and better and better to the point where you have literally straight-through processing of a PDF-based invoice, as an example, going directly into the system, hitting tolerance checks, pushing the payment via whatever rail you'd like, making sure that everything is compliant, but at the same time streamlined and optimized. And the power of AI, and I just gave you one simple example of that, the power becomes even more powerful when you're looking at data sets of trillions of dollars of invoices in every industry, in every commodity, in every type of market, so that the system becomes so smart that 99.9% of manual intervention could be removed. That's just one example. And we're working on a whole host of AI-based capabilities in our platform, but I just want to give you that simple one so you can get your arms around it.
All right, so I think, automating and being able to do that, I think is really important. But my fear right now is much more on the third-party risk management. Once again, you don't know what you don't know, and in this case, this is not a good thing. We don't know what's going on in a lot of our supply chains, and there's some really bad actors out there. So how can all of this data and AI help us to mitigate some of this risk?
It's a wonderful question. I'm glad you're asking about third-party risk. Look, if we think about how rudimentary we are today in terms of really understanding supplier risk, it's so obvious that we're at the very front end of something. Every company that you work for, in many ways, you're living in your own world, right? You're doing risk assessments and surveys. You're using third-party data to give you some insight in terms of potential risk, litigation risk, judicial risk, a whole host of risk components around your suppliers. Why wouldn't you want to employ this entire community? Just like a neighborhood watch.
Yeah.
Not everyone has to watch their own house and have a security guard outside their house and their own dog. There could be a community watch program where that data, through the use of information technology, is normalized, distilled, and real time. So as something happens anywhere in the world that spells some component of risk that your company cares about, the community can have that surfaced for you in real time. Now with COUPA, we're actually very early in this area. We've done a lot of great work here, but we're still very early in this area. You could envision a world not long from now, 18 months to 24 months from now, where through AI, normalization of the supply base, understanding of those third-party feeds, as well as the transactions that every customer is having in real time, feeding into that to distill for you insight for which suppliers you ought to stay away from, as well as perhaps prescriptions for suppliers you ought to consider in a given category. And literally doing it in flight. You have a requisition that's started and it's going through workflow and it's discovered instantaneously that there's a supply chain risk somewhere. That should be stopped in real time and presented to the right person for perhaps hot swapping to a different supplier. So we're really at the very beginning of what we can do here, and that's a huge new value proposition that procurement can offer the CEO and the board of any organization, knowing that you're rock solid in terms of mitigating supply chain risk, continue to drive profitability, and continue to take our game up, as procurement professionals, to be more and more strategic for the enterprise.
But my worry is still, and I want to know that your platform and the community intelligence is going to help us find third-party risk. But how is it going to be able to tell me that my third parties are using a fourth party or a fifth party? And at some point, if I'm found to have modern slavery in my supply chain, if I give people the basic example, and you all know that Target, when they got hacked, and sorry, Target, I keep bringing up your story, but when they got hacked, it was an HVAC supplier who just connected in to check out their heating and cooling system, and he had been carrying this malware for probably years. They never knew and never thought at that point that an HVAC contractor is going to queue into our system and steal all of our credit card data. And the one I think is even more bizarre is the one who has a sensor in a fish tank in Las Vegas. You've heard this one. A sensor in a fish tank to remotely be able to monitor the water quality in a fish tank was able to hack in to the casino through another device. So how is our community intelligence going to help us start saying, look, you've got to be aware of their third parties and your third parties, fourth parties, and fifth parties? Is that someplace that we can actually get to?
Absolutely, and I can't think of many better utilizations of information technology and the use of community data to help be on the forefront of that. But we also have to be logical. We have to be honest, and we've been at this for 10 years. I joined, I came to this conference. Our company had maybe 20 people or so, 10 years ago. Now we have nearly a couple of thousand. We're a sizable, public company that we're proud of being. But if I look at what happened over the course of that 10 years, many people in this room may hear some very, bold kind of discussions about what's going to happen in the future. Many of you, I'm sure, are very rudimentary as it pertains to supply chain risk, around supplier risk. Many of you pulling, let's be honest with each other, you're pulling old feeds from D&B, and you've got people manually doing things in spreadsheets. you don't have real-time information around what exactly is happening everywhere. You're doing supplier surveys and maybe some third-party risk hanging off of that. So there's some basic things we have to do first, right? We have to be at a place where every company in the world actually has one centralized view of every supplier that they're interacting with. Let's begin with that. And then begin to hang off data about those suppliers, and then hang off second level, third level, fourth level data around the suppliers that they're working with. And only then can we get to the place where we're actually leveraging community transactional insights to give you instantaneous insight as to what's happening. So there's a maturity curve here, and I want to be very, very sensitive to the fact that I know many CPOs now all over the world that are very early in that maturity phase. And
we have CPOs who still haven't done their spend profile of Fortune 1,000 companies.
I understand.
So that's table stakes. You've got to know where you spend your money. That should be the very first thing. And yet I still, to this day, I just cannot believe the people that are in that early part of the journey.
And Dawn, what's even worse often, and we go into these large organizations, and if we're fortunate enough to have a connection with the CIO or the CFO or the CPO, very often the most senior executives assume that data is all known and clear, and they just assume, what, we didn't know that? And we'll do these feeds out of their AP systems, and we'll normalize the data, and we'll show them, hey, you're missing $200 million worth of opportunity here and 50 here. If you consolidate your contracts here, here's what you can get. And the CEO or the CIO think, I thought we had all that figured out. So we're actually even behind the 8 ball. Part of it is being honest with executives in the company and saying, look, we really haven't got our act together kind of in this area yet. But then coming with a maturity model, a vision of how we go from where we are, which is a little bit behind, all the way to some of the concepts you and I are discussing now around community, real-time insights. And I'd urge you to work with partners. I don't like to say vendors because we don't think of ourselves as a vendor. Think of vending machines as a vendor. I think of partners that will bring best-in-class information technology, best-in-class best practices, that are focused on measurable outcomes with you and can pick you up wherever you are on that maturity curve and move you faster and faster toward the obvious, which is just driving so much value for companies, right?
Does anyone here have a 100% view of all of your spend? One. I mean, that's amazing, which means we have so much opportunity. And oh my God, that's scary. There's so much risk at the same time. So that's one of the reasons you don't know what you don't know, and we've got to be digging into technology, and we cannot be afraid of it. So I shared at the CPO roundtable that I have, and he's still not here, we have a CPO who said, I don't need any more technology. I've got everything I need, and this was 4 years ago, and to me, that's obvious. You've got one step into retirement. You've been drinking from this fire hose for so long. You're overwhelmed, and just, I'm not buying anything. I'm not going to deploy anything. I'm going to just gracefully trite out of the system. But that's only one now that I know that still is a SIG member. The rest of them, thankfully, have all retired out. And we've got the more modern CPOs here today. But so we've got a lot of opportunity. But so I don't know if any of you follow Adam Lashinsky. He writes a Fortune data sheet, and I love it. I get it every day in my feed. I think he's fabulous. But he recently interviewed you, which I was so excited when I was getting ready for this talk. Because I want to talk to Adam one day. I want him on stage, too, so you can help us do that. Sure. But in part of your interview, you said data is an asset, and it should be recognized as an asset. Can you share a little bit about that?
Sure. Look, the interesting thing about technology providers, you made me think about the person that left, didn't want to employ technology. I think on behalf of the information technology industry, and now I've been at it for 26 years, I think we've done a real disservice to many of the folks in the room, because in many cases, some of the largest technology providers or vendors, as many call them, have sort of sold based on feature and function and said, look, we're going to solve all your problems if you turn on this technology. And by the way, the more and more features it has, the more likely you're going to be successful. And I think over the last 10 or so years, that's proven not to be the case. And the real value comes when you truly can tie the best technology, yes, with the best, most optimized process, with the most thoughtful impact to change management and people. And when you do those things really, really well, it's a very simple framework, right? Technology people and process that many systems integrators talk about. When you do that well, you start actually getting mass amounts of spend under management, you get mass amounts of visibility to spend, you start driving improved profitability, visibility, risk avoidance, and you start building up a massive data set. And with our company, we've been fortunate enough to build up a massive data set, well over $1 trillion of live, normalized transaction data. And from that, you could actually distill some insights. And you can go out to your customers, as I say, many who are here, and not talk about a long consulting project, but actually give meaningful value right away. Say, look, you've got a process that's touching 16 people to get something approved, and you're doing it for goods and services that are under $100. And by the way, it's costing you more to run that process than it is to just make it self-approved for the person originally. Or you're able to say, look, you're renegotiating contracts in this category, but by the way, you have massive leakage in this category or massive off-contract spend in this category based on the data of over $1 trillion of transactional data. You can go out and talk to your individual customer and say, here's an area where you have real meaningful risk. You have risk of people that are abusing the system based on the collective data set that continues to grow and grow. So I think data, as I've heard many times stated, I'm sure many of you might have heard that, but data is like the new oil, right? Mm-hmm. And leveraging real-time, sanitized, normalized data across a massive growing data set is the future of the enterprise software industry and the technology industry. And those partners that can help you distill value out of that data in real time, quickly, in a way that's valuable for you, are likely to be the ones that you're going to have as partners for many years to come. And we hope to be that type of partner for this community.
So, a couple things. One of the things just cracks me up. I just looked over at the picture, and you've lost all your facial hair. It's just so weird. Like, this is the Rob I met. That's the Rob I've known for the last, 6 or 7 years has looked like that. And I just looked over and it's like, that's not Rob. Anyways.
It's very hot in California. My kids told me to shave it, so I shaved it.
Well, I like the fresh look again. But we need to get an updated picture, I realize, because that's no longer you. Somehow that was squirrel. But I have 4 kids of my own and 2 stepkids. And one of the conversations that was in your article was about trust and transparency. And this is a conversation I have with my kids all the time. I want to trust you. You need to be transparent. If you're transparent, I will trust you. So I'm asking for some parenting advice as well. But which is first? Do I need the transparency first, or do I need the trust first? How does that work in your mind in the business world?
Yeah, I really appreciate that question. That was asked to me at the Fortune event as well. I'm very passionate about my answer to this. I don't think it begins with trust. I think it begins with transparency. Because if you don't trust someone, or if you need to feel that you trust that person, then there's a potential other side of it, which is they may be, doing something untruthful. But if you begin with transparency, then you're effectively putting goodwill on the table.
Right? But what if I don't trust you to be transparent?
You should begin with a willingness to listen to what we have to say and then evaluate. Now, if I just do something that is not trustworthy, okay, of course, then things turn. And I think that's actually a very important thing in this industry. The power is massively shifting to the buyers from the sellers. There's so many people trying to sell you something, but you actually have the power. You have the power. You have the wallet of the organization at your disposal. So the way we've structured COUPA is very simple. We are transparent. We're going to tell you honestly, this can work for you, this won't work for you, you're evaluating us improperly, here's a better way to look at it, because we believe that over time, by being honest, high integrity, and transparent, we are playing on a level playing field, and we ought to win the right to service our customers and partner with them for the right reasons. Not because we convinced them that we're trustworthy, not because we had a great PowerPoint, a great demo, a great connection, or some sort of thing. The world is becoming more and more transparent. People are seeking authenticity like never before. Authenticity is pure market efficiency. It's honesty, it's transparency. Anything that is non-transparent is a blocker to market efficiencies, to complete sort of lubrication of commerce and interaction and communication. So I'm all about seizing seizing transparency as the starting point. Truth, authenticity, transparency as the starting point. And that is, to be honest, that is one of the reasons that I'm even more proud of what we've been able to achieve over the last 10 years with our business, because we didn't take any shortcuts, really. And, you know, many of the customers that you hear are references. We want to be references because they're getting real measurable value of working with us. If they're not, they should tell us so we could try to fix it. But we don't want necessarily to leverage favoritism or, well, I trust you to help me here, so you will help me there. It's not about trust. Bring transparency, authenticity, honestly to the way we're interacting. If it's driving results, great. If it isn't, then we don't deserve to win. We don't deserve to be your partner for the long term. We don't deserve to build the kind of company we aspire to build. So that's my belief in that area.
So while you're saying, you know, that's how COUPA views it, it'd be nice if all suppliers, all providers viewed it that way, to start with the transparency.
Yes, and I think over time they'll have no choice, because information is you can't block the light of truth and authenticity. Eventually people will figure out. By the way, this audience is pretty darn good at figuring out who's full of it and who's legit. Now, many of you are not necessarily tech savvy, you don't come from that world, so you could be sort of spun in a direction that, you know, you're sort of sensing things. Well, they look legitimate, they're public, or they have good people, or third parties are saying good things about them, Gartner puts them here, whatever. You're sort of feeling it from that perspective. I think over time you're going to feel it from a much more granular, meritocratic, measurable perspective. You know, again, for me, again, not for us, but if you look at our website, you look at the customer tab, it's all customers showing signs. This is the measurable value we've gotten from working with you. That's the directionally where I think every vendor will eventually have to go, or else they're just going to get commoditized. And we don't want to be commoditized, so we're not focused on that. We want to take pride in giving measurable value to every one of our customers, and we want that value to grow over time. That's something to tell your parents about, you know?
So I'm really excited. I went to one of your webinars. It was done with Level App and your CFO to talk about risk. And I just have to say, I applaud you, because to put the CFO up there and talk about risk and how it's, you know, 64% of our members report to the CFO. 64%. So if the CFOs have risk, third-party risk is one of their big, you know, crisis that they're dealing with, then at least 64% of our CPOs better be talking about risk. So I really enjoyed that, and I'm going to have them on my podcast really soon too, so I'm really excited about that as well. But the other part is your new book, and it was Smarter Together, and about community revolutions. And it's a really engaging title. Can you tell me a little bit about what prompted you to want to write that?
Well, what made me want to write that actually began maybe 12 years ago when I was at business school, and I'd ride my bike over to the MIT lab, and I saw some of the utilizations of AI. And it became very obvious to me that AI really becomes powerful when it's applied to massive data sets. And being in the world where we're constantly part of various types of communities, whether it's a book club or virtual communities where we're assessing what restaurant we'll go to based on a Yelp rating, or we're deciding on which vacation place to go to based on friends' references or whatnot, it became clear to me that if we apply information technology to these problems, we could actually galvanize a whole host of interesting communities. And I can't think of a more interesting community than a community of professionals who are responsible for trillions of dollars in B2B spending, actually working together to drive measurable value for their companies and their stockholders and shareholders. That seems to me like an incredible opportunity. Incredible. You know, we'll pick one restaurant over another based on, you know, which meal or a little referral, some piece of data or price point. But many of us are responsible for making massive, you know, multi-tens of million-dollar decisions with different suppliers and different ways of spend that aren't nearly as informed as that simple example. So we're beginning in our journey at COUPA to begin to turn on some of these use cases where community leverage can actually take hold. And I think we're at I talk at our all hands, we're probably 10% of the way into this journey. But I think in coming years, in the coming decade, we're going to be able to unlock enormous amount of value in partnership with our customers, and perhaps, you know, other vendors, other suppliers will embrace this approach. But again, I think it's just incredibly powerful.
But you have a conversation in there about privacy and reciprocity, because Smarter Together, yes, but we still have privacy needs. And then we have all this data, and we do need to have reciprocity as well. So can you share a little bit about your thoughts on that? Because I thought that really, I loved it.
Well, first of all, if you're going to utilize any sort of data from your customers, you have to make sure it's sanitized, it's normalized, it's completely anonymized. You don't want to be sharing, data from one customer to another customer in a way that could expose you. But secondarily, you have to offer some value. Facebook is using my data on a daily basis. I'm not sure how much value it's offering me by putting certain ads in front of me for things that I don't necessarily want, right? And then actually tapping into other applications that I have on my platform and putting up their ads and monetizing me, monetizing my eyeballs, monetizing my attention without necessarily doing much more than that. If we can actually surface up value-added insights like the example of third-party risk. Here is something that is likely to happen with a supplier to whom you are routing $60 million worth of your spend. You should consider these different suppliers for that category. That's valuable. That's on the front end of value. That's preventing risk from happening. That's something people ought to want to tap into. So I think for one, absolutely, you have to have a dynamic where the data that's being leveraged is completely anonymized, clean, sanitized, normalized, of course. But you also have to do it in a way where you're giving back value. You're giving something that the end user and the company is getting that they wouldn't be able to get on their own, like the neighborhood watch example, right? That's key to this.
I love that. Are you open to questions from the audience?
Absolutely.
Okay, so we should have Brittany and Sean, if you could. Oh, there's Sean in the back, and there's Brittany over here. They're holding up catch boxes. So it's a catchable, throwable mic. So if you have a question, I could just sit here and talk to Rob, and you can just eavesdrop as much as you want, or you could participate in the conversation. So if you would like to ask a question, just raise your hand, and they will get close enough to you to be able to throw you the mic. They won't throw it all the way across the room. Anyone?
By the way, in the spirit of transparency, feel free to ask anything you'd like. We're a public company, so if I can't answer it, I'll tell you that. But otherwise, I'd be delighted to answer anything on anyone's mind or share anything from our experience.
Over here? Brittany, run. In your high heels across the room and then throw. Oh.
Nice.
Good arm. Wow. Oh, and you didn't throw the mic part. You threw the ball and didn't let go of the mic? Okay, well, that's one way to do it.
All right, we broke it. Great. So I love what you're saying about community and
excuse me. Can you say your name and your company?
Sure.
So everyone knows who's speaking?
Gary Graves with FedEx. Love what you're saying about community and coming together as a community of buyers and sharing data, but I'm interested, how do you design a legal framework that allows us to share that volume of data, whether it's spend or pricing or risk, or how do you design a legal framework where we're able to do that?
Sure. I appreciate the question. So we have designed that framework, right? We have over 1,300 customers around the world. Only 2 of the 1,300 decided not to become part of that approach. That's number one.
So it was an opt-in?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Opt-in. Has to be opt-in. Has to be opt-in. There's no way you push something like this without the legal team fully vetting that on your end. It has to happen. And without getting into every detail of it, you have to assure that customer that data will be fully sanitized, normalized, anonymized. You have to get the legal team comfortable with what type of data, right? Look, if you're talking about indirect goods and services and how quickly those suppliers are delivering to you and whether or not their invoices are incorrect half of the time, there's value there to the buyer. So you have to offer something of meaningful value, and you have to be very, very transparent. And that's how you can create a hub and spoke. FedEx is the hub and spoke model, right? Everyone here has got their own point-to-point, right? You've created a dynamic of going to Memphis and back out for operational efficiency. Now that's in the physical world. Same is being done now in the information technology world, right? But you have to you opt in, and you have to clear it with your legal team, right? And I'm just giving you real facts around our customer base.
That's great. Anyone else have any other questions? Oh, you do have one over here? Okay. Oh, no, you're not going to throw as far as Brittany?
Nikki Craig from Supplari. Given your experience, how do you get procurement to be more strategic? How do you get procurement leaders to be more of a driver of business versus just a protector of the business?
Sure. Look, that is one of the most fundamental questions I think we have at conferences like this consistently. This is a fundamental question of our function, without a doubt. So I'm going to give you a number of answers, and it's not just for me to do, a number of answers. Number one, offer something measurable and quantifiable and clear to the CEO of your company. And I use the simple example. If you run into the CEO of your company in the elevator and you've got 4 floors to travel on and you've got 20 seconds, are you going to be able to say something that she or he can clearly remember you for? Did you improve profitability? Did you remove risk? Did you create a certain level of usability? Are your employees in the organization delighted with the experience of expensing or purchasing or paying or invoicing? Is there something you could say that is unquestionably clear as day to that person? That is table stakes. And if you could do that, all the other things begin to follow, right? Great talent begins to come to you in your organization to drive that strategic value. Incredible information technology is something you could choose from because you're given the budget to leverage that type of thing. You get to go on stage at places like this to share your experiences of the successes that you've had in driving that value. But I will tell you, a prerequisite, I think, for many of the people in this room and everywhere, is to actually step up and do it. Because again, you hold the purse strings of your organization to the tune of trillions of global dollars. Taking the reins of that and not getting pushed into just a little widget or sort of core little area within CFO is something that is upon you to seize. And we try as much as we can to do our part. We call our conference Inspire. We've had it for 7 years. We're trying to inspire this revolution of individuals like yourself and others stepping up and showing executives what's possible in this area and the value that we could deliver together. Tens and tens of millions of dollars at every one of the companies we work for. So shame on us if we don't do it together. That's the way I see it.
I love that. Is there a microphone out? Yes? Okay. Any other questions? So while they're thinking about their questions, we've had a tumultuous time lately, both geopolitical, economic. I mean, we've got everything from Brexit on one hand to trade wars to stock market that just seems to be on bipolar from day to day. Can you talk about data and what you think we're going to be able to see? Or are there any trends that are coming out? Because you're getting all this granular data fed into you. Can you share any insights? Because I personally, I'm excited. I'm often excited, and then sometimes I'm nervous. So could you share your thoughts on that?
Well, sure. I'll say 2 things. One, now is an incredible opportunity to strike while the iron's hot to the question of becoming more strategic, because just about every CEO globally is concerned about supply chain risk. They're concerned about certain markets not being accessible. I mean, it's obvious. So the ability to go and have that conversation with your CEO that says, look, if you give me this much budget, you give me this much resources, you give me this level of support, I can significantly decrease the likelihood of us facing some sort of significant challenge to our business. So perfect opportunity to do that. But secondarily, to your question around data, what we're starting to see, and we launched something called the COUPA Business Spend Index, the COUPA BSI, we're starting to see leading indicators of trends in spend by industry. So we could tell you in your industry, it's taking a little bit longer, for example, over the last quarter to get things approved. Or there's a significant increase in rejections of approvals of certain commodities in your industry. Or the average spend per employee in your given industry, or in your sector, or in your geography is actually increasing or decreasing. So it gives you the opportunity to use data to be on the front end of the ability to support your own business. To be able to say, well, what we're seeing in our market is there's a bit of a slowdown in this area, or there's a bit of an acceleration in this area. So you could fine-tune the way you operate your own procurement team and your own CFO's organization. And we're just at the tip of the spear on this. Now with the COUPA BSI, we've actually mapped it back to 2016, quarter by quarter, and found a very, very strong correlation between the COUPA BSI and the stock market, the macroeconomic environment. Very similar to the payroll numbers that come out of ADP, which is a little bit backward looking. Here we're showing forward-looking data around what's happening by industry, and our customers are tapping into that, and the industry as a whole is tapping into that. I'm actually going to New York after this and talking to CNBC about this, because we want to create this as an index that'll be as follows as the ADP payroll numbers, in fact, even more so, because of the very strong correlation around spend data and macroeconomic dynamics.
Will you mention the word CPO at least 5 times in your interview at MSNBC, please?
I'd be happy to
How
do that.
important the role of the CPO is and how strategic it is. I would really appreciate that.
Absolutely.
So in the interest of time, and because I've been given that sign, they're so subtle. What else is going on at COUPA? This is now, I know this is not supposed to be a sales thing, but you always have something exciting going on. So what can we expect next?
Well, look, we set out a very clear vision when I get going in 2009, 10 years ago, around the 5 letters in COUPA. They all stand for something, and we're not all the way, remotely all the way done with delivering on that vision. And every letter stands for something. The C is comprehensive. We want to provide information technology solutions that are fully pre-integrated to help CPOs, to help what we believe will be ultimately chief spend officers manage every area of their spending comprehensively. Everything from contracts and inventory and sourcing and analysis and expensing and payments, everything. And we're well on the way to that vision. The O is about open. So being able to interface to every third-party system out there, of course, get leverage out of your existing, SAP and Oracle and other ERP deployments, but also create a platform so that third-party providers can build on our platform, tax engines, other components working within this business spend management platform. The U is user centricity. Now, we're very well known for user centricity. We have incredible adoption levels, but we're only scratching the surface there. Our vision is that the best user interface is no interface. In other words, the system should be doing everything possible for you so that the human is only interacting with it when they could offer real value, right, to the business process. And the P is prescriptive. So using this massive growing data set to be able to prescribe for our individual customers things that they should be thinking about. Consider these suppliers, consider renegotiating in this area, consider avoiding risk in this area, consider a whole host of different things that could be prescriptively shown. And lastly is A is accelerated, and our goal is to try to get to value with every one of our customers as quickly as humanly possible. We're averaging now kind of 4 months to go live for mid-market customers, roughly 8 months for large enterprises. Some of the largest companies in the world are proudly standardizing on us because we figured out a way to get to value very, very quickly. Gone are the days of the old, I used to do SAP deployments and all that. Not that it's a fine company, but these were 90s kind of technology solutions. We want to go faster, so we're pre-configuring our solutions. We're going to start doing it by industry. So if you walk up and you're a credit union, like the 40-something credit unions we have, we'll get you live in 3 months and we'll get you meaningful value. So we're pursuing every one of these 5 vision areas that spell out COUPA, C-O-U-P-A, and helping, doing our part to help galvanize a broader category that we're coining as business spend management. Managing business spending effectively for every company that we have a chance to partner with.
That's great. Well, Rob, as usual, it's always wonderful to have you come and visit and share your insights. And like I said, over this journey has just been incredible. So thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you so much. Thank you.